Good evening to you. More details have been emerging today about the killer who carried out the London terror attacks and his last night spent in a hotel in Brighton.
Well, the next day, Khalid Masood drove to London and killed 4 people and injured 50 others on Westminster Bridge. And in the grounds of Parliament, he killed PC Keith Palmer.
Masood was born Adrian Russell Ajayo at Erith near Dartford in 1964. He later used the name Adrian Elms, then Khalid Chowdhury, and then Khalid Masood.
He had connections to Crawley and Rye, Northiam and Eastbourne, moving around Sussex over the years.
Well, live now to Andy Dickinson outside that Brighton hotel. Andy, more on today's events.
Yes, Fred, as you alluded to there, we now know so much more about the terrorist Khalid Masood. He was born in Kent as Adrian Russell Ajayo before his conversion and spent much of his life in Sussex. And he spent his final night before the atrocities in Westminster here at this hotel, the Preston Park Hotel, on the outskirts of Brighton.
The Metropolitan Police today released this picture of Khalid Masood. These his final moments, gunned down after killing a policeman, a tourist, a mother and a pensioner outside Parliament. The night before he committed these crimes, he stayed here.
We sold him the room and we had a little chat with him. He was very friendly. We did ask him what he's doing down south and for one night, and he said he's visiting friends in Brighton. And he was a normal guest, very friendly. In fact, he was very, a happy man. But, to hear this after what's happened is shocking for us, really, because, you think, well, you don't know these days between the nice person or bad person.
This then is the room where Masood stayed before the Westminster attacks, police having scoured it for details, taking away the remote control, the kettle, even the linen. Masood had also stayed here the previous Friday, a receipt in his hire car leading forensic and plainclothes officers to the hotel, where they've since interviewed guests and staff. Michael Peterson's business is based here. He met Masood early on Tuesday morning.
Perfectly normal guy. Nothing for me to notice anything untoward. Do you know what the shocking realization of this is? That I stood next to an atrocious killer without knowing it, without having any inkling what he was about to plan to do.
Masood used his real name, ID and credit card to check into the hotel, smiling to staff and telling them he was worried for his sick father in Wales, only hours later to have caused such carnage.
The staff here visibly shocked by events of the last few days as attention switches back to the police and their ongoing investigation. And the question that has to be answered, why was Masood in Brighton? Well, just to bring you up to date with the latest news from that investigation, and police say they've made 2 more significant arrests, taking the total number to 11 across the country. We believe 10 people are now being questioned, and police here reminding people that the threat level hasn't changed, though it remains severe, but they are urging the public to remain alert but not alarmed.
Andy, thank you. So what else do we know about Khalid Masood? Fred.
Thank you, Stacey. Well, his parents, Janet Elms and Philip Ajayo, married in Crawley, and the family lived at Rye in East Sussex. The family later moved to St James's Park in Tunbridge Wells. Masood was jailed in 2000 after he was convicted of a stabbing in Northiam, slashing a man across the face. He was also convicted for a knife attack in Eastbourne in 2003, serving time at Lewes Prison and Ford Open Prison in Sussex. On release, he worked as a manager at Air and Chemicals at Bodiam in Sussex. He married in 2004 and then moved north to Luton, Birmingham and then to London with his young family before returning to Birmingham, staying in Brighton, as we now know, the night before the terror attack. Stacey.
Thanks, Fred. Well, those details reveal more about the man who went on to kill. Today in the communities of the South East, a mixture of amazement and shock. Derek Johnson has been speaking to people who knew him and some who would rather forget.
The schoolboy who became a terrorist. Adrian Ajao, as Masood was known in his school days, smiles in this photo taken with the football team. Born near Dartford, he went to Huntleys in Tunbridge Wells. It's since been demolished, and later moved to Sussex. As a child and a grown-up, he adopted other names before becoming Khalid Masood. To his fellow drinkers at this pub in Beckley near Rye, he was Ady. Ady would sit alone doing the Daily Telegraph crossword.
He was always intimidating, very, very intelligent, never rude or unpleasant, but there was always something unpleasant about him. And I got told a story about he'd had a row with somebody in the other village and he didn't know which car the chap's was, so he slashed everybody's tyres.
He moved to Northiam, already with a criminal record, convictions for assault and GBH.
I'm amazed. I mean, it's just beggars belief, isn't it? I mean, he certainly wasn't religious then. I'm fairly certain there was nothing religious about him at all. In fact, you'd have thought he was completely anti-establishment, as I remember it.
In the year 2000, Masood's violent tendencies were displayed again here at what was back then the car park of the Crown and Thistle pub. He got into an argument with a man called Piers Mott and slashed him across the face with a knife, an attack for which he was jailed for 2 years. Mr. Mott has since passed away. I spoke to his widow this morning. She said those events were still traumatic and that the attack was completely unprovoked. Masood served his time in Lewes prison, after which he carried out another horrifying assault with a knife in Eastbourne. Nick Eastwood knew him at the time of that first attack. What was his reputation back then?
Well, I suppose after that, one of aggression and people, obviously had a massive, complete dislike for him and couldn't understand why he'd done that. Piers was never aggressive to anybody. What he's done was atrocious. Yeah, it was just a monstrosity, wasn't it, to do that to innocent people.
The football-loving teen turned vicious thug may have been radicalised while teaching in Saudi Arabia. Even those who feared him most, though, could not have imagined the evil he would go on to do. Derek Johnson, ITV News.
Well, live now to our political correspondent Phil Hornby at Westminster. Phil, thoughts of course still with the victims, including PC Keith Palmer, who stopped Masood getting into Parliament itself and paid, sadly, with his life.
That's right, Fred. I'm in Parliament Square. Behind me are the gates where the attacker stabbed the policeman, and all around me are flowers that people have been leaving today on both sides of the road here. People who work at Westminster and people who are just passing by and want to pay their respects to the policeman who died. Meanwhile, there is of course a major security review going on here at Westminster. The number of officers at the Palace of Westminster has doubled over the last couple of days, and it's not just here at Westminster, it's throughout central London, it's in the big railway stations. People going home tonight via Victoria and Waterloo will see lots of armed police officers patrolling those stations. And the latest we have on the inquiry is it's thought the attacker carried out some recces in the days leading up to the attack, including possibly at Gatwick Airport. Meanwhile, today, religious leaders have been meeting to give their response to this awful tragedy. Here's the Archbishop of Canterbury.
We have, all of us, come together because it is a moment of sad reflection, but also a moment of determination for our nation together.
Phil, the end of what has been a very, very difficult week for many people.
Indeed, Fred. I think MPs are very glad to get back to their constituencies this weekend. And the message from everybody here is it is business as usual. They'll be back here on Monday. And business as usual, you know what that means these days? It's Brexit. And Brexit will be centre stage when MPs return next week. At least that's what everybody hopes. Everybody hopes that next week normal service will be resumed.
We hope so, Phil. Thank you very much indeed.
Of the latest on the investigation and updates